Now, I'm sure there are some of you who already know all about this camera, but I'd also be willing to bet there's quite a few of you who, like myself, are a little late to the party. And this camera is the JVC GY-LS300. Yes, JVC. It's not a brand you often hear talked about in the kind of DSLR filmmaking community, but this camera is pretty awesome, especially when you look at the specs only on paper. We'll get to image quality in a little bit, but let's just go over why I think this camera is so awesome and why it's underrated. In my opinion, this camera should be a lot more popular than it is. When you look at stats on YouTube in terms of how much traction this camera has gotten in terms of people talking about it and kind of the buzz around it, it's pretty minimal. And that's why I call it a hidden gem. I don't think there's a lot of people giving this camera credit, and I myself was included in that bunch. It wasn't until someone left a comment on one of my videos saying, hey, you should check out the LS300 by JVC, that I finally gave it a second glance and kind of looked at it and really started to see the value that's here. But let's talk about that. Why is this camera so awesome? Well, I think from a hardware standpoint, JVC has really nailed all of the components that most of us are looking for. So let's talk through it. What on this camera is so great from a hardware perspective? The first thing you should know is that the LS300 has a Super 35 size sensor. A lot of people like full frame, there's other people who prefer micro four thirds, but Super 35 is really that golden standard for filmmaking. And what's cool about the LS300 is that it actually has a micro four thirds mount. So the sensor is Super 35, but the mount is that mirrorless style that you get with micro four thirds. So that means you can use a speed booster. And when you use a speed booster on a Super 35 size sensor, you actually get really, really close to full frame. And I have a speed booster on here right now, so if I throw full frame glass on this, this is actually incredibly close to full frame 4K video, because yes, this thing records 4K. While we're talking about the sensor, I should mention this camera has built-in ND filters, 3 levels of ND filtration. So it is possible to have a Super 35 size sensor with a micro four thirds mount and have built-in NDs, and that's a huge benefit. It also has built-in microphones for scratch or reference audio, which I really like. It's really nice that they're built right in, you don't have to plug anything in, and no matter what, you're gonna get some kind of audio. There are some other audio options, but we'll get to those in a little bit. On the side panel here, we've got a lot of buttons and knobs for added functionality. Very common on broadcast cameras and ENG style cameras. It's familiar if you've shot with an FS5 or an FS7 or a DVX200 or HVX200. A lot of that functionality is built right into these buttons, so everything is easy to access. On the inside, we've got a flip out LCD, and I am happy to say it articulates the way you would want an LCD to articulate. So you can actually flip it around, do selfie style video if you really wanted to, but it's just nice to have this style of screen. I know it's pretty common on cameras like this, but compared to DSLRs, you're often fighting with terrible flip out screens. I know the GH4 I'm a huge fan of because of the screen, but other cameras from Sony they get it so wrong, and really I think all LCD screens should be like this. Now the screen itself, it feels a little lower quality, I guess I would say. The build quality specifically is kind of plasticky. A lot of people have said that about this camera. Overall, it's kind of plasticky. It's something that probably won't be a problem as long as you're treating it right, but it doesn't feel as strong as something like an Ursa Mini. The screen quality itself is actually also pretty terrible in my opinion. The Ursa Mini has a great screen, and having just used that and switching to this, it's a serious downgrade. The GH4 I think even has a better screen than this. It's not the end of the world because you can use an external monitor and what's there does work. It's sufficient, but the LCD screen could be a lot better. On the inside, we've got 2 SD card slots. Now that's great because that extra slot gives you that extra capacity for recording, and SD cards are really cheap. It's very easy to pick this kind of media up at a Best Buy or online for really low prices. From a menu standpoint and using the camera, it's very bare bones, very basic. It's not a bad menu, but I wouldn't say it's a good menu either. Everything's where you'd want and it's laid out in a logical fashion, so it's pretty easy to find the stuff you're looking for, but it doesn't really look all that nice. The resolution of the graphics is pretty poor in my opinion, and it doesn't have that charm that you get with something like an Ursa Mini where using it is almost fun, like an app on your phone might be. The menu system on the LS300, very simple, very economical. It gets the job done, but it's kind of slow, a little cumbersome, probably should be a little bit better and easier to interact with. It feels very engineered rather than designed. Coming around to the back of the camera, we do have a built-in viewfinder. However, this viewfinder sucks. don't use it. The LCD is pretty terrible, but the viewfinder is even worse. Yes, you can use it in a pinch if you need to block daylight for some reason, but really, nowadays you can find much, much better options. If you're gonna consider getting this camera, you probably do want some kind of external monitoring solution, just so you have something nice that you can show clients or a producer or director, whoever you're working with, so they have something nice to look at. You can work with the camera as is and get shots that are in focus and check exposure and everything, but it doesn't really have that nice look to it on the LCD or the viewfinder. The viewfinder especially, just stay away from it in general. The LS300 uses these common style camcorder batteries. Very cheap, pretty easy to find. Not much to say there other than they're small and it actually lasts quite a while. This battery I've been shooting on all day and it's at, I think, 2 out of 3 bars left. So it works pretty well. I haven't been shooting a lot today, kind of nonstop. It's been kind of intermittent. So, you could burn through that faster, but it's definitely gonna be better than something like an A7S if you're familiar with those batteries and how fast they go. These batteries are pretty good. As we make our way around the camera, you can see the side handle. Pretty standard, pretty comfortable, nothing to say there. Makes the camera easy to hold. And up top, we have a top handle. Now this actually comes off pretty easily too. It's just a nice little twist screw that pops on and off. And just like that, you can take it off. So if you need to strip the camera down for weight purposes, maybe you need to put it on a gimbal or something, you can always take things off. But really the main benefit of this top handle is for functionality, using the camera, holding it from the top, which is a lot more comfortable than using the side handle in my opinion. But it also adds XLR inputs, which is really cool that they do this without wires externally. It's all through the interface connector down at the bottom. So when you pop this in, and you screw this down, you actually get XLR input direct to the camera, which is really handy if you come from a DSLR style of filmmaking and you want something with XLR inputs sometimes, but not others. Take the top handle off and on as you see fit, screws on just like that. And up front, we got HDMI and SDI outputs. This is great because sometimes cameras only come with one or the other, so having both is great for the options. And oftentimes the cameras that do come with both, you have to pay a premium to get that. With the $3,000 price tag that the LS300 is currently at, there is a lot of value here, especially when you consider all the great features that are built in. One thing that I should mention is that if you are going to use a speed booster on this camera, which I do recommend if you want that full frame look, the Metabones speed boosters come with that little foot, that riser. That doesn't actually work on the LS300 because of the ND filter wheel. It actually gets in the way. It's a minor inconvenience, but you'll have to take that foot off of the speed booster in order to get it to fit on the mount properly. Overall, from a hardware design perspective, there's not a lot to complain about or find fault with this camera. Yeah, the build quality is a little bit lower than I'd like and the viewfinder and LCD should be improved, but everything you would want is right here built in from the beginning. And for $3,000, that's an incredible value. Most other cameras come with sacrifices or trade-offs where you have to pick one feature over the other, and you're looking at one camera that has X and one camera that has Y, and you have to pick between the two. The LS300 has everything. I think JVC looked at what filmmakers want and decided, let's put it all in one camera. The only problem was not a lot of us were paying attention to what JVC was offering. I know I was included in that. When this camera was first announced, I kind of wrote it off as something JVC was doing to try and compete and didn't really have anything I wanted. I should have given them more attention because this is a great camera. There is so much to love about this camera just from a hardware design. But hardware design isn't everything. We need to look at the images and the footage that this thing can produce. I'll try and let the footage speak for itself as much as possible, but I will share some of my thoughts so you can make your own judgments on the quality of the footage from the LS300. All of this footage was shot JLog1, which is JVC's log color profile. This puts the dynamic range of the LS300 on par, if not better, than other popular cameras in its price range. So the dynamic range isn't going to blow you away, it's nothing amazing, but it is good. And if I had to judge it by eye, I'd probably say it's in that 12 to 14 stop range. I also shot all of this footage with the Metabones speed booster to get that full frame look. But you do have to keep in mind, you can only use the regular version of the Speedbooster. You can't use the XL version with the LS300. The Speedbooster XL actually recesses too far into the camera, and there simply isn't room inside the LS300 to accommodate. So stick with the regular Speedbooster and you'll be fine. Now I should mention that if you're using a Speedbooster with the LS300, you'll actually get some vignetting around the edges. This isn't a problem at all because the LS300 actually lets you crop into the sensor slightly. So if you set it like a 92% crop, you're totally fine and you avoid that vignetting altogether. With this setup, you get really close to that 1-to-1 equivalence with your full frame glass. The internal codec does a pretty good job on the LS300 retaining detail in 4K, but it's not the highest quality 4K footage I've seen. In terms of resolution, you'll actually get better results out of other cameras, and you may even get better results out of the LS300 if you record externally. That being said, the internal recording to the SD cards does a pretty good job, and it's decent 4K. The one issue I do have with the footage coming off of the LS300 is that the LS300 seems to be incorporating some kind of noise reduction into the footage. Now, I looked through the menus over and over and over again, and even reached out to JVC support, and yet I could not figure out a way to fix this problem. It's probably not that easy to see on YouTube due to YouTube's compression, but essentially what it looks like is the LS300 is kind of removing the noise and kind of smearing out those fine details. And even in some low light shots, you'll notice there's not a lot of noise. That may sound like a good thing, but I actually prefer to do my noise reduction in post. Because I found with the LS300 that even in well-lit daylight scenes, I was losing a lot of that fine detail and texture that I was getting with the GH4 in the exact same setup. So it could totally be user error, but I tried as hard as I could to correct the problem, and there just didn't seem to be a way to fix it. However, this is a pretty minor problem and may not be an issue for everyone. So this is definitely a situation where you should try before you buy and rent the LS300 to see if you run into a similar situation. You may think the footage looks great, or you might have a similar opinion to me. It's probably just a matter of subjective opinion, but for me, I was losing too much of that detail to really love the footage. It looks good, no doubt. I like the dynamic range, I like the resolution, but that noise reduction or whatever it's doing was just a little bit too much of a problem for me, and I'd prefer to have more control over my footage in post-production than less. Aside from the GH4, I can't think of another camera that offers so much bang for your buck. From anywhere from $3,000 to $3,500 if you're gonna get the Speedbooster, the LS300 is such an incredible value for your money. Yes, it might not have the best image quality, but for somebody looking to get a lot of value out of their limited funds, the LS300 is a great option.